Hello, everyone. My name is Joanne Okitoe-Heizeg, and I am the Communications Officer at the Geneva Trade Platform. This week, every day, together with our special guest speaker, who is also our correspondent, we are bringing you live updates from the 13th Ministerial Conference, or MC13, in Abu Dhabi. And our special correspondent is Jan Walter, who is the Senior Policy Advisor at Akin. Jan, it's a real pleasure to have you.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, so Jan, this is your second time at the Ministerial Conference. Can you tell us what is an MC13? Who's there and why is it important?
So, I mean, that's a good setup to kind of take it from this, so that the audience kind of sees and hears what is really happening. So it's the highest governing body of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, right? A body of 164 members, soon to be 166, and we'll get to it today. Who get together, mostly countries get together and talk about all things trade. Right, but it's not only the ministers. It's also a number of stakeholders who have a stake, because it's ultimately the traders who do the international trade. They need to abide by certain rules. So it's the whole kind of international trading community that gets together and decides not only on what needs to be decided on, kind of like gather decisions and agree and negotiate. Some pieces are pre-negotiated and they're basically just gaveled by the ministers, given a stamp. But some are really open for negotiations, and we will see this week. We will see a lot of negotiations, and there is also an aspect of the ministerial, which is a traditional one, which is to kind of direct the regular work of the organization for the next couple of years. So really telling the members, who then kind of go back to Geneva, where the World Trade Organization is based, and they have a mandate from the ministers on what they should be looking at. So if you ask what is at stake, and I think that was the second part of the question.
Yeah.
It's really that it's keeping the rules up to date, with what's happening in the world, with what's happening, both geopolitics as well as kind of global economics. But it's also, thinking and directing or pushing the organization in a certain direction and bringing it to the 21st century. So, one of the aspects which is going to be big at this ministerial is the package of decisions and discussions, which is dubbed reform. Some would even, and I think it was Ambassador Tai, the US trade representative, who is kind of, looking at this ministerial as a reform minister. So that will be a lot on the agenda to bring it bring it to the 21st century.
So you're basically referring to reforming the Ministerial Conference as it has been operating and moving it towards what?
So it's the whole organization, reforming the whole organization, right? Okay. So looking at, is it capable of coming to decisions under the rules that are there? Is it capable to negotiate new agreements? Is it really discussing what is topical, or is it discussing something that is irrelevant? And obviously there are differences in views on this. You would probably see a different view on this from a least developed country and a major industrialized country. So there are differences, and the ministers under the procedural decision-making process as consensus, that's kind of taking a holistic view on what the organization wants to do in the next time. And then there's an aspect which might seem to the listeners, it might seem a bit technical, but it's a really important part, and that is the reforming the dispute settlement function, which basically means the organization is set up in a way that if there are trade disputes among members, among countries, the organization has a mechanism to resolve those disputes one way or the other. However, that has been halted, especially by the US kind of blocking certain procedural elements, because the US were not satisfied with how it's functioning. So now there's a big discussion about reforming this mechanism so that the organization can come back to properly resolve disputes among its members.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned that there are some issues which are pre-negotiated. Are there some top issues which are going to be negotiated in this particular ministerial conference?
Yes, I think, yes, there are. And I would believe that there are 4 key topics which are going to be negotiated, and eventually they will become kind of part of, a bit of a quid pro quo handling and horse trading at the end. And those 4 are, one is on agriculture, especially, domestic support, how much countries can provide funds to domestic farmers and how this can be dealt with, so it's not trade distorting. The second one, so it's not harming other members. The second one is an agreement on fishery subsidies. And if I simplify a lot, it's basically the conundrum there is whether the members will lean more towards protecting the fish or lean more towards protecting the fishermen, right? And there is a discussion ongoing on this. Another part, which is, and I would say to industry and to a lot of our clients at Akin, this is really important, is the e-commerce moratorium. So it's called e-commerce moratorium. What it basically is a long-standing agreement by WTO members not to levy taxes on electronic transmissions. This agreement will expire unless the members extend it. So it has been the practice, the long-term practice, to keep extending this moratorium. Now there are some members who would like to see it extended permanently, basically carve it in the stone. And there are some members, some countries, who want the moratorium to expire so that they would be able to really kind of start levying taxes. Now, if you ask me, I mean, we are talking about consensus, so majorities, minorities don't really play a role. But these, we can name, and I think it's no surprise that those that would like to let the e-commerce moratorium expire are particularly India, Indonesia, and South Africa. There's a lot of countries across the development spectrum and across the regions who wish to extend it. So that will be an interesting part. And the other piece, the fourth piece, I've mentioned 4 pieces. The fourth piece is the reform, and especially the dispute settlement.
All right, excellent. So it's like a very packed agenda for this week, in terms of the issues which the different stakeholders who are gathered there are going to be looking at. In terms of, sort of like highlights, do you have a sense already of, what today's highlights are? And could you share those with us?
Of course, and I should have said at the very beginning. I should have said I have interesting tidbit coming at the end, so that the viewers can kind of like keep with us. But I hope they do anyway. The ministerial conferences are usually set up in a way that all those kind of pieces that are positive and they're already pre-negotiated, they kind of come at the beginning, to lock them in, formally sign, and it's done. It cannot be undone. And this already happened. So I think it was yesterday, because some ministers came into town over the weekend as well. So there was a final meeting of ministers on what is called the Investment Facilitation for Development, which is an agreement after a very long time, an international agreement on investment. Now, this agreement has a number of really interesting provisions. It's, it talks about how to attract investment. And so, but the aspect important to the WTO is that not all members are part of the discussions or part of the negotiations. So they didn't sign up for this agreement. And this includes, for example, India. This includes also the US. While the US is not kind of, is not against these discussions and against this agreement, that they haven't signed up, but they're fine with others signing up to it. India, for example, is not keen on this agreement becoming part of the WTO architecture, which basically means that other countries who are not currently part of it would be able to easily sign up under the WTO heading. Now, it's 123 countries who have already signed up yesterday. So that's a big step. But the members now, the members of this initiative will now try to, bring it under the WTO umbrella. And that will be another piece. While procedural, it will be another piece of the discussion. So that's the IFD. Accessions. The WTO has now been 7 years, the longest hiatus or longest pause since its beginning in 1995. without new accessions. And this ministerial, just today, we've seen Comoros and Timor-Leste formally exceeding to the WTO. So that's why, why I mentioned it's 164, but now it's expanded to 166. Now, this is important for systemic reason, but it's also important, obviously, for those countries. We are talking about two least developed countries, and they are now part of the WTO family.
So accession is basically when new members are admitted into the WTO.
Yes, exactly.
Comoros
and we had two, Comoros and Timor-Leste, having exceeded today. There is a third element which I wanted to share with you, and it's quite interesting because in the afternoon today, and it's already almost 5 p.m. here in Abu Dhabi. This afternoon, we've seen what was called ministerial conversations. Now, usually kind of very scripted statements on specific topics. This time around, it was on trade and sustainable development, and the other one is on trade and inclusion. But what was interesting, what I heard, I wasn't necessarily in the room. I was running around. What I heard is that the lead negotiator on the U.S. side, Ambassador Tai, the U.S. Trade Representative, basically her statement was pretty much off the cuff. She at the beginning, she put aside the briefing notes from her staff and said, "Look, I'm putting my briefing aside, and I will just speak what I think." And she did, she did a bit of a kind of speaking against the Ricardian model of international trade. So that's probably going to be the talk of the town this evening. And colleagues and stakeholders will be pointing out, is this mood setter for the whole week, or was it just a piece that came in? If you ask me, I would say that's going to be significantly kind of permeating throughout the week. This is not new from the U.S. trade policy side. This is something that the U.S. Side has been looking at for longer term, and now it's kind of it's put in a speech in a way. So let's see what comes out of it. It wasn't committal in a way of when the negotiations come in, but we can see it as a scene setter from the U.S.
Okay, that's interesting. Could you tell us a little bit what exactly you mean by the Ricardian model and how that is likely then to impact, the negotiations?
So in very short, and I do apologize to hardcore economists out there if I'm misleading slightly, but Ricardian model of international trade or international economics is basically saying that international trade benefits all countries, right? Because of the advantages out of trade. Now, obviously, that has been under scrutiny for some time, looking at, yes, it might benefit in total, it might benefit all countries, but does it benefit all segments of societies within those countries? And that has been the friction which has been out there for a decade or two. And I think this is what the current US administration is kind of, really diving deep into and looking at, how to correct the approach. So, we might have voices, and maybe it's not going to be just from the US, but particularly from the US, to kind of, come in and start talking about, well, we need to rethink trade. Now, that's obviously difficult at this stage of the negotiations, and difficult at, how at a time when really this is the final stages of some of the pieces. But yeah, that's probably going to be a reality of this week.
Sounds very exciting. Looks like there's some things might be shaking, and hopefully the somber atmosphere that has been much anticipated is going to there's going to be some light coming in. So excited to follow through the proceedings of the week together with you, Jan. In terms of tomorrow, can you tell us, what are some of the themes which will be tabled and discussed?
Yeah. So again, one thing is a schedule which is being circulated to the members, and another thing is the reality, and that's always a little bit different. So yes, the schedule I can share with you that the schedule is that tomorrow morning the fishery subsidies agreement will be up for debate, and in the afternoon there will be a discussion on agriculture. And we talked about both of those, so I won't go into detail there. But that will be, kind of like setting the scene on these two topics. Now, what the delegates and ministers will do, they will, basically have a lot of meetings, impromptu or formal, scheduled, to try to hammer out various pieces, not only fish and agriculture, but everything else. I should also mention, and this should have come at the beginning, but I should mention that many ministers see a ministerial conference as an opportunity to meet in a bilateral setting. Yes, everybody talks WTO and everybody talks the ministerial and the files there, but you would have a lot of ministers, coming in here and basically scheduling a lot of bilateral meetings, because this is, the whole trading world comes into one place, and there is a benefit of meeting in person. So there is a lot of that as well. I know from my experience, having worked for two different ministers, yes, there's a lot of bilaterals, and ministers want to use this opportunity to kind of talk about many other issues, not only the WTO ones.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So a lot of sort of corridor diplomacy also taking place alongside the big conference gathering.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think, Jan, that's a great way to prepare, the setting for the discussion this week. And we look forward to hearing more from you tomorrow and the day after and Thursday as well in terms of what is happening. So thank you very much, Jan. Yeah.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you very much to the audience for tuning in. And I'll be looking forward to speak to you and by extension to others tomorrow and the coming days. And obviously, I'm available on LinkedIn and everywhere else if anybody wants to get in touch directly. Thanks very much.